The 2025 Formula One season is finally over, as we are now only 2 weeks before Christmas. But let's get into something that is a hotly debated topic coming out of this season. And that is the driver rankings for the entire 2025 Formula One season. Who was the ultimate best driver on the grid? Who were some of the surprises of 2025? Who was some of the most disappointing of the season? That's what we're going to get into in this video. And just like we did with our mid-season rankings that I did back in August, make sure to go check that out to compare those rankings to what I have gone for here. We are going to go through all 21 drivers that raced in 2025 and start from the very back until first place. Before though I get into my own driver rankings for the season, let me know in the comments section below your driver rankings. You don't have to do it for the entire field, but at least let me know your top 10. Very curious to know what you guys think of all the performances, especially by the top drivers for 2025. And of course, make sure to give this video a like. But let's start at the very back, and no surprise, in 21st place we are going with Jack Doohan. Of course, he only did the first few races of 2025 in the Alpine, and the reason I've gone with him below Colapinto is because even though Colapinto has been a bit more crashy than Doohan was, even though Doohan had a very stupid crash in practice at Suzuka, Colapinto has shown a lot better performance compared to Pierre Gasly. There's actually been some races where Colapinto was faster than Pierre Gasly, whether it was qualifying and the race or one of the key sessions over the course of a weekend. When if you go back and look at what Doohan did compared to Pierre Gasly, Doohan was comfortably a bit off Pierre in terms of lap time, not just in qualifying, but over the course of a race situation as well. And even though I like the guy, I think he's a good driver, he has to be the worst driver of 2025. But just ahead of him, the driver that replaced him, Franco Colapinto. And even though Colapinto, yes, was more competitive with Gasly and on pure lap time was better than Doohan, again, still was a bit accident prone and failed to score a point during the 2025 Formula One season. Something that, as Pierre Gasly proved, was not impossible from when Colapinto started with Alpine at Imola back in May. Now we've got those two out of the way, let's get into 19th place, which for me has to be Yuki Tsunoda, a driver that has been so disappointing in 2025. Now I must add that yes, driving that second Red Bull in 2025, and not just 2025 at this point, over the last few years has been a curse. That is clear to see. There is a massive performance difference between Max's Red Bull and whoever's driving the other Red Bull. We cannot deny this, but that still does not give Tsunoda an excuse to perform the way he has. Regularly not finishing the points, regularly finishing last in races, getting time penalties on quite a regular occasion as well. Tsunoda was very poor in 2025 and has not given himself a great showing at a front-running team because of how, if we look back at how he was performing with AlphaTauri / Racing Bulls in the last couple years before he went to Red Bull, there was talk that Tsunoda, maybe could go to a front-running team and be a good fit for whoever is a front-running team in the future. Like, Red Bull, Aston Martin, obviously was another team talked about. But this 2025 season is not going to get anyone on the grid wanting Tsunoda's signature. If he stays in Formula One, hopefully he can improve, I assume, at the Racing Bulls team in 2026 and get back to pretty much what he was doing before. But Tsunoda, I can't put him any higher than 19th place because he was just so disappointing in a car that was Again, difficult to drive, but it was not bad enough to the point where he should be finishing as low in the championship as he finished. In 18th place, the Canadian Lance Stroll, a driver that I don't rate very highly for very obvious reasons. I made a video on this, obviously, a couple years ago, pretty much exactly 2 years ago, and 2025 has not changed my opinion whatsoever. In fact, it was, yet again, a typical Lance Stroll season. Couple great drives in wet or changeable conditions that makes us think that he's actually really good. And then in normal dry conditions, he is absolutely rubbish. That is Lance Stroll. So many Q1 eliminations, especially when the car was not actually slow enough to be eliminated in Q1. There were so many times where the Aston Martin was clearly top 10 material, yet Stroll ended up 17th or 18th on the grid. This guy does not get any better. He is arguably getting worse as his career goes on. And he's not even that old, so we can't sit here and say, well, you know, he's getting on a bit in age. And I don't think it's an injury thing, because obviously I know he missed technically a Grand Prix in Spain because of a hand injury. I don't think it's to do with that. He just isn't good enough. Simple as that. And if in the new era, if Aston Martin, you know, coming up the new era in 2026, if Aston Martin want to win the Constructors' Championship, that is impossible with this guy in their car. Even if the car they produce next year is the fastest on the grid, they won't win the Constructors' Championship because they'll only have one car really in play, that being Fernando Alonso. In 17th place, just ahead of Stroll, is a driver that may surprise people, but I've still been pretty disappointed with this particular driver's season, even though his form did pick up for a few races after the summer break, and that is Carlos Sainz. Given how good the Williams car was in 2025, it was overall, over the course of the season, it was the best midfield car. I don't think anyone would deny that. For him to be beaten the way he has been by Alex Albon, a driver that, in terms of talent, is inferior to Sainz. This has not been a season where Carlos has performed to his best. I think we can safely say that. You know, when you factor those two things in, the performance of the car plus his underperformance compared to Albon, that's why I've got him ranked down in 17th place. It's been a really poor season for Carlos Sainz. This has been arguably his worst season of his career. The only season I can think of as bad as this was 2018, where he was comprehensively beaten by Nico Hülkenberg. But maybe you could argue that Hülkenberg was at a higher level that season. I personally would disagree with that. I think Albon has probably been a slight bit better this year than Hülkenberg was back then. So, yeah, very disappointing season. If this guy wants to actually make a success of his Williams career, he must step up big time next season. Yes, he got a podium in Baku. That was great, but that was only a glimpse of really what, I wouldn't say what he should be doing, because the Williams wasn't a podium contending car in every race, but the way he, you know, was so quick through the weekend and got the absolute best out of the car and, you know, really comfortably beat his teammate, that's the Carlos Sainz we're expecting, given what we saw of him at Ferrari and even McLaren, where he was very, very good. So a lot needs to improve with Carlos next season, especially if Williams are as strong in 2026 as I think a lot of us think they will be. If they do have a car that can fight for podiums next season, he needs to be up there, especially if he wants to keep himself in the discussions for maybe getting back into a front-running team in the future. If he gets beat by Alex Albon the way he has this season again, then he's going to be pretty much solidified as a midfield driver for the rest of his career. One place ahead of the Spaniard is Liam Lawson, a driver that had some good results in 2025. Of course, he spent the first 2 races in that Red Bull that was very hard to drive, but still his performance level was really quite poor. Then got put into the Racing Bulls car, and like I said, since he was put in the Racing Bulls, had a few very good results. A 6th place in Austria, 7th in Brazil, very, very good drive that was. He had some other points finishes as well, but they were too few and far between, if that makes any sense. You know what I'm trying to say with that. He just didn't do it consistently enough. And if you go and look at the head-to-head between him and Isaac Hadjar, a rookie, again, simply not good enough. Hadjar has had a great season. Hadjar, for me, is the rookie of the year. But Isaac Hadjar is not, as I said, I think in my mid-season driver rankings, Hadjar is not the next Max Verstappen. Hadjar's a very good driver, but he is not a generational driver. So to be beaten like this by Hadjar over the course of the season is not good enough. Lawson should be at least matching Hadjar in terms of the head-to-head, and should be, given how quick the Racing Bulls car was over the course of the season, Lawson should have been consistently finishing in the points like Hadjar was, but it took him a few races to get up to speed. Once he did, again, some points finishes came, but just not enough, I'm afraid. He may stay on the grid for 2026. If he does, then he gets a chance to get closer to whoever his teammate is. But ultimately, Liam Lawson, he's a good driver. When he's at his best, he's very good. But it's just the consistency is the issue with him. Some weekends he's miles off of it and nowhere to be seen. Some weekends he's really, really good. If he fixes that consistency, I think he could be a Formula 1 driver for quite a few years, but he needs to fix that if he wants to actually have a long-term Formula 1 career. In 15th place, Esteban Ocon, a driver that I rated very highly in the first half of the season. I think I had Ocon in my top 10 in my mid-season rankings. The reason I've dropped him so low compared to the mid-season point is because in the second half of the season, he was nowhere near as good as he was in the first half of the season. Not just the lack of points finishes in a Haas car that you have to say improved in the second half of the season, especially in the final, 5 races or so. But if you look at his head-to-head compared to Oliver Behrman, at the mid-season point, it was pretty good. But after the summer break, Behrman has comfortably beaten him and really put him in his place in that Haas car. So that has resulted in a disappointing second half of the season, and that's why I've got Ocon in 15th place. If he was able to keep up those consistent, or not consistent, but keep scoring some points here and there like he was in the first half of the season, I would probably have him ranked 2-3 spots higher. But yeah, he just was not good enough whatsoever in the second half of the season. It was probably one of the weakest second half of the seasons we've seen from Ocon. Normally, Esteban is either a driver that is consistently good throughout a season, or he will start off slow and then get better. But this season started off well and then just got a lot worse. So not great from Ocon. Needs to be consistently next year a lot more on it if he wants to make his Haas career a proper success. And one place ahead of him, his ex-teammate and the Frenchman and the final Alpine driver in this list, Pierre Gasly, in 14th place. I couldn't put Gasly any higher because even though I think he's done well to cope with what's been a very difficult Alpine car, there was also a lot of races where I thought he was, I wouldn't say mediocre, but average, let's say. Still did, again, a decent job with what was a tough car to drive. I do feel as though next season, we have to remember Alpine will be Mercedes powered in 2026. If the Mercedes power units are good next season, I do get a feeling that Gasly will get back to his best and be consistently scoring points. But if it isn't, then it'd be interesting to see what type of season Pierre has. I don't know what you guys think, but it does feel kind of to me with Pierre Gasly that if the car's good, or at least handling well, then you tend to get the best Pierre Gasly. But when the car has its issues, his form tends to drop with the form of the car. He's not able to continue to perform really well despite clear car issues, maybe as well as others. So that's something to watch out for next season. But hopefully Alpine will be a lot faster next season, and with Mercedes power, they very well could be. In 13th place, Gabriele Bortoleto, a driver that had a good 2025 Formula 1 season. If you go look at the Drivers' Championship standings, though, you wouldn't think that, given how low he finished. But if you look at his head-to-head against teammate Hülkenberg, who finished a lot higher, and has also had a very good season, I think we need to really sit here and give Bortoleto the credit he deserves. Rookie year, to come in against a Nico Hülkenberg that is, I think we could say at this point, one of the top 10 best drivers in Formula 1. And to do such a great job against Hülkenberg is really impressive. The only issue, again, like I said in my mid-season rankings, is the consistency on race day. He did improve his consistency in the races a bit around the mid-season or second half of the season point. So he's getting there, but he just needs to continue to improve in that area. At his best, I think Bortoleto can be potentially a Carlos Sainz type driver. Not quite an elite, Verstappen, Leclerc type driver, but someone who could be a very good complementary number 2 driver who scores lots of points, maybe gets a couple wins here and there if it's a fast enough car. He's going to have a good Formula 1 career. I definitely have that feeling. Of course, next season, Sauber will become Audi. And I know Audi are pretty high on this guy. So, yeah, keep your eye on Gabriele Bortoleto, a driver that is going to be certainly one to watch in the next few years. Next up, a driver that was racing Bortoleto in Formula 2 back in 2024, and a driver that may surprise people in terms of me going for this driver in this position of 12th, Kimi Antonelli. Now, Antonelli, in the second half of the season, improved quite a lot in terms of his performance comparatively to George Russell, was a bit more consistent, but if you go and look at the season overall, that mid-season patch where he couldn't score a point, I think really hurt his season. And hurt his season in the case of him getting a higher ranking in my own personal driver rankings. If he had continued scoring points consistently in that mid-season area, the European races where he couldn't score a point, I probably would have Antonelli ranked in the top 7 or 8 of my driver rankings, but he really was poor during that period. Also has had a couple weekends where he's been a bit erratic as well. We have to remember he's very young. I think is he still 18 or 19 now? He's a very raw talent. He will get a lot better as time goes on, but he has a lot to learn from 2025, no doubt about it. If you go look at his head-to-head compared to George Russell, again, it wasn't as bad in the second half of the season in terms of the lap time loss to Russell, and there was a couple races where Antonelli was able to beat Russell, such as the race in Brazil and Mexico. But again, wasn't consistent enough with, keeping a decent gap to Russell. I mean, we have to remember with George Russell, Russell is one of the top, 3-4 best drivers on the grid. So it's always going to be very hard for Antonelli to come in and immediately get right on the pace, if not beat Russell in his debut season. But I think Antonelli could have definitely done a little bit better. And again, it's that consistency issue, and again, just a bit too erratic at times, which, let's be honest, you would expect of someone who's 18 years old. Not everyone who comes in to Formula One as a teenager is going to perform like Max Verstappen did. We have to accept that. If Lewis Hamilton entered Formula One, in 2003, as opposed to 2007, when he did enter at 22 years old, we would have had a much different Lewis Hamilton at that point. Maybe still would have been amazing, who knows, but it would have been a much different Lewis Hamilton. So I think with Antonelli, we need to give him time. Next season, I'm sure he'll be a lot better and a lot more consistent. Whether he can, win a few races and maybe fight for the championship if Mercedes have a fast enough car, who knows? We will see. It'd be very exciting if they could have both drivers in the championship fight. But Antonelli, I'm sure, will get better. But yeah, not the best debut season, and definitely not, for me, Rookie of the Year. And just a place ahead of him, the driver he replaced at Mercedes-Benz, Lewis Hamilton. A driver that there was so much, so much hope pinned on him through pre-season and coming into the season. Obviously, Ferrari, there was so much hype with them coming into 2025. And it all just fell apart pretty much immediately. Now, of course, the reason why Ferrari have had such an awful season, it's not Lewis Hamilton's fault, but Lewis Hamilton in himself has not performed anywhere near well enough. Compared to Charles Leclerc, Leclerc has, if you look at the head-to-head, Leclerc has comfortably beaten him. The lap time difference as well in qualifying is way too big. And remember, this is the greatest qualifier of all time we're talking about with Lewis Hamilton. I know Leclerc's a very good qualifier himself, but simply not good enough. And the reason he's dropped in my rankings compared to mid-season, where I think mid-season I had him in like 6th or 7th place, is because at least up until the summer break, he was consistently finishing in the points. And even though he wasn't beating Leclerc, he was still getting kind of the best out of the car that he can, given the state he's in as a driver at this point. After the summer break, though, his results have got a lot worse, a lot less top 5 finishes, and just the performance has not got any better compared to Leclerc, really, with Hamilton. And this is, I think, since I started doing driver ranking videos, this is the lowest I've ever had Lewis Hamilton. And for Lewis, if you look at his entire Formula One career, I think this past season, 2025, is the worst season of his career. Even though, yes, he's had other seasons which were very difficult, 2009, 2011, last year even, he was a lot better in terms of his own consistency, and was still able to pick up some really great results despite whatever issues the car had. But this past season, he didn't really have any good results. Yes, he won the sprint race in China, but let's be honest, the sprint races don't really matter, and they are a bit Mickey Mouse, given that you just go straight into sprint qualifying, basically, with the teams unable really to get a proper setup on the car. So, yeah, a disappointing season for Hamilton. Of course, I made a video on Lewis Hamilton's future a few months ago and talked about why I believe it's time for him to retire from Formula One. Make sure to go check that video out. There is a link probably in the description. And looking at next season, I don't see Ferrari being that much better. I think they'll still be at best fighting for podiums. Maybe they'll grab a win, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't grab a win at all. But I think I'm at this point, given how he's performing, I am pretty confident that 2026 is going to be Lewis Hamilton's final season. And if it is, and he knows at this point already that next year is his final year, I really hope that he announces his retirement before the season starts so that he can have basically a farewell tour for the whole season, because he deserves it. He is, for me, the greatest of all time, for many, the greatest of all time, and he deserves a farewell tour across the entire planet at all the brilliant racetracks of all the brilliant racing fans there are that have supported him over the years. He deserves that farewell tour. So I hope he will give the fans that, so we can all say farewell to one of the most exciting and, again, the greatest we've ever seen. But now we enter the top 10, and starting off with 10th place, Nico Hülkenberg. A great season for Hülkenberg. I was a bit fearful of Hülkenberg's decision to go to Sauber from, being at Haas last season. Last season, I thought he was really good. Thought he did a great job in what was a pretty good midfield car. But going to Sauber after Sauber had such a bad 2024, I was thinking maybe Hülkenberg was going to have a much worse season. But he's ended up having another very strong midfield campaign. And finally, he scored a podium. After 15 years of waiting, he finally got the podium in the most unlikely of ways. Started from the back at Silverstone and finished third in very wet conditions at Silverstone. Just amazing drive from Hülkenberg. But there's been so many other great drives. I remember in Spain, he finished, was it 5th or 6th after starting 15th? He had many good points finishes as well. So, yeah, a brilliant season for Hülkenberg. I think the only reason I don't have him ranked any higher than 10th is because his head-to-head with Bortoleto is not, I wouldn't say disappointing, but it's maybe not as great as it maybe should have been, given how, if you look at the Drivers' Championship standings, you'd think Hülkenberg has been clearly the better driver at Sauber, but it's not quite been the case over the course of the season when you look at the head-to-heads. So that's what keeps him in 10th place. But I think at this point, if you look at what he's done in Formula One since he came back at the start of 2023, Nico Hülkenberg is one of the top 10 best drivers on the grid. I think we can very comfortably say that at this point. And it's just amazing to say that because, if you look at the way he went out of Formula One as a permanent driver back in 2019, he looked like he was getting worse, getting further away from that possible podium. And you look at how old he is now, 38. Again, you'd think he'd be a significant step worse than he was, say, 10 years ago when you could say that was prime Nico Hülkenberg. Or was it prime Nico Hülkenberg? Maybe you could say now is prime Nico Hülkenberg. This guy just does not get slower. He just continues showing up, getting the results, and impressing season after season. So, yeah, congratulations to Hülkenberg. Another great season. And next year, he will be an Audi Formula One driver. I bet he never thought he would be that a few years ago in the pandemic when he was a commentator for Sky Germany. But here we are. Who knows what will happen next season? I'm not expecting Audi to be that great in the first year, but who knows where they'll be. We don't have any reference for what Audi could be like in Formula One. So fingers crossed they'll be stronger than expected, and maybe we'll see Hulkenberg consistently right up there next season. In ninth place, also quite old driver at this point, Fernando Alonso. Not the best season he's had at Aston Martin, but still a good one at that. Consistently finishing in the points, consistently qualifying in the top 10 as well. Alonso's had a good season. Again, though, not his absolute best season. I think there were some race weekends where he wasn't quite at his best. The brilliant best that, of course, we've seen him, from him, not just from his entire career, but, just the last 3-4 years as well from the Spaniard. But I think consistently being in the top 10 like he was has earned him this place in the top 10, and once again dominating his teammate. And yes, I don't rate Lance Stroll, we all know that, but still, to dominate your teammate is still an impressive thing to do, because Lance Stroll is not good enough, in my opinion, for Formula 1, but he's not an absolutely 0 out of 10 driver. I'm not going to go that far. So to still dominate Stroll is still impressive for me. And not only that, impressive given the age that Fernando is at. Over 40 years old now. He's been in Formula 1 almost 25 years. I think the Grand Prix in Melbourne in March for 2026 will be the 25-year anniversary of his first Grand Prix. Absolutely crazy how this guy just continues. And what the sad thing is next year could be his final season, because he was talking about his future a few months ago, and by the sounds of it, 2026 could be his final season. If it is, I hope it's at least with a car that can win races. Maybe not win the championship, but if he can win even just one race next season and then retire on that, that would be enough for all of us Alonso fans who absolutely love the guy and have adored his career and what he's done. Be another good season for Alonso. Fingers crossed that the car he drives next season will be a race-winning car. The first Adrian Newey car that he will ever get to drive. Will it be the last he'll ever get to drive? We will see. And in 8th place, the Rookie of the Year, Isaac Hadjar. A driver that I did not rate really at all this time last year. When it was announced he was going to be at Racing Bulls, I personally thought it was a mistake. I didn't think that he was really that great of a driver in terms of, great enough to be on the Formula 1 grid. Of course, yeah, he had been a decent Formula 2 driver, but I didn't think he had done enough to show that clearly he deserved to be in Formula 1. But right from the get-go, he surprised us all. Even his first weekend, nearly got into the top 10, did embarrassingly crash out in the formation lap, but then responded immediately by qualifying 7th in China, a track that he's never raced around, remember. And then since then, consistently, top 10 qualifying result after top 10 qualifying result. He had so many Q3 appearances, I'm sure I have on the screen, or have probably already shown on screen by now, how many Q3 appearances he had in 2025. It was an astonishing amount, considering that the Racing Bulls car was probably, the 6th best car over the course of the season? Maybe you could say it was the 5th best car, but even in the 5th best car, to get in Q3 that many times is so impressive. And of course, his reference for 2025 as a teammate has been, Liam Lawson. Even though Lawson has not been great, Lawson is still a good reference point. And Hadjar, let's be honest, has dominated Lawson in 2025. It's been such an impressive season. One of the most impressive seasons I have seen in a while given my own expectation level coming into 2025. Hopefully next season will be just as good for him, but it's a new era coming up. Who knows how good his car for next season is going to be, and whether he can continue making the top 10 on a regular basis. Obviously, we can't go any further without mentioning the podium we had at Zandvoort. Yes, all he did was hold position in the race, but the qualifying performance he put in to pretty much get that podium, obviously Lando Norris's DNF helped with that, but the qualifying performance he put in, 4th on the grid, was astonishing. One of the best qualifying performances all season long. And, you know, there are plenty of drivers on the grid, especially the midfield, that are not maybe the greatest in qualifying, but can be good enough in race situations. You know, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Sainz, drivers like that. But to be that consistently great in qualifying is the hallmark of a very good driver. So we'll see with Hadjar how his career goes after this. Not everyone who has a good rookie season goes on to be, you know, or have a great Formula One career. You know, Daniel Kvyat, for example, had, in my opinion, a pretty good rookie year. 3 or 4 years later, he didn't have a drive. So who knows what will happen. But I really hope he can build on what has been a fantastic season. And like I said, he is, for me, and I think for most people, the rookie of the year. Just one place ahead of him in 7th, a driver that maybe some of you will argue is a rookie, but technically is not, because he did 3 races last year, one of them for Ferrari, is Oliver Bearman. And this is quite a surprise, me ranking him this high, because if you go look at my mid-season ranking, I had him, I think, around 14th or 15th place. I wasn't super impressed by what I had seen of Bearman up until the mid-season point. But since the summer break, this guy has been incredible. He's been, if you just look at the races from the summer break to now, I mean, if you were doing a driver ranking just on the second half of the season, Bearman would have to be in the top 5, maybe even the top 3, some would say. He has been special and has actually shown me things about him that I didn't really expect. I didn't think Bearman to be someone who could, you know, consistently race in, race out, show up and get the best out of the car. I was thinking, especially with him only 20 years old, I was thinking maybe he's one of those drivers that, yeah, half the time he'll have a good weekend, but the other half of the time he'll, you know, be a bit all over the place, which is pretty much how he was in the first half of the season. But again, since the summer break, he was consistently on it every Grand Prix. And then once the Haas car suddenly became a pretty much a front-running car from Mexico on, he has really shown just how good he really is. And all I'll say is this with Oliver Bearman: if he can keep this up next season and Haas have a fast enough car that he can still impress and score points, he will be a Ferrari driver in 2027. No doubt about it. As long as he keeps up these performances. Fingers crossed he does, because this is a new, young, exciting driver that is going to be someone we're going to have around for quite a while. Again, he's only 20 years old. So get used to the name Oliver Bearman. Could be Ferrari's next British driver. And the last driver of the midfield teams that we're going to have in these driver rankings, in 6th, Alexander Albon. A driver that was so incredibly good in the first half of the season. I had him in, I think, 4th place. The only reason I've dropped him to 6th is because the second half of the season he was not performing at the same level, which is a bit weird because was it Zandvoort and Monza, the first 2 races after the summer break, he was really good, scored quite a few points. But then as soon as Carlos Sainz improved his form, Alex Albon went the other way. Still performed well in certain races, still outdid Sainz here and there at others in the second half of the season, even though he didn't quite maybe get the credit he deserved for it. But yeah, it just wasn't anywhere near good, as good of a second half of the season. But still, if you look at the season as a whole, to outdo Carlos Sainz the way he has, and to get all the results he got in 2025, it is such an impressive season, and he absolutely deserves to be sixth in my driver rankings. No doubt about it. He has been one of easily the most impressive drivers in 2025, and this has been, without a doubt, the best season of his entire career. Can he keep it up though in 2026? That is the question. We'll see. Ultimately, I think he can. If the Williams car next season is as good as we're all hoping it will be, and he's confident enough, I think Albon will be right up there on a consistent basis. The only thing that might hamper him is if Carlos Sainz gets back to his best. But if he doesn't, and that Williams car is competitive, then I think Albon will have another season like he's had. And if he does, he might get some front-running teams knocking on his door, asking for his signature. Maybe, McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, someone like that in the future. But he's got to keep up what he's done this season if he wants to get to that type of situation. We'll see in 2026. But yeah, what a season for Alex Albon. A driver that I pretty much had counted out back in 2020/2021. I mean, obviously 2021 wasn't even on the grid. I wasn't really a big fan of his at that point, and when he got the Williams seat for 2022, I'll be honest, I didn't really think, I won't say he didn't deserve it, but I wasn't really excited for him getting that seat because I had seen what he'd already done in Formula One and wasn't that hopeful. But since he's come to Williams, he has been so good for this team, and he is at this point the team leader. Of course, he's just completed his 4th consecutive season as a Williams driver, and here's to even more great results and success for not just Albon but the Williams team in 2026, a team that I think is the dark horse for the new era. In 5th place, a driver that led the championship for so long and led the championship for the longest of anyone in 2025, but ultimately lost, Oscar Piastri. So disappointed in Piastri, honestly. The reason he's lost the championship is not because of bad luck or car failures or whatever you want to call it. It's because when it got to the real, that important third of the season, the last third of the season, where you really got to deliver those big results to get the job done, he failed to step up to the plate. And again, it's such a shame because so many times in the first half of the season up until the summer break, there were so many times where he had stepped up to the plate and delivered in big moments, at Spa, overtaking his teammate on the first lap. Other times, making key overtakes to win races, like he did on Verstappen in Miami, for example. He was so good at it. And that's why I thought, especially after Lando Norris's DNF at the Dutch Grand Prix and Piastri won, at that point, I thought Oscar was going to be champion, because I thought if Oscar just keeps doing what he's doing, how can he be stopped? Especially in that car, which is still proven to be easily the best car on the grid. But he found a way to lose, really. And it all started in Baku. Awful weekend in Baku. Crashed in qualifying. And then made a awful, terrible mistake in the race, crashing after a few corners, and that is what set off the chain reaction. Singapore obviously got bumped out of the way a bit, by Lando Norris in a way that was a bit clumsy, is what I was trying to say, by Lando. But, it was a fair move still for him to go for it. And that got Oscar even more riled and put his headspace in a negative one when it needed to be in a positive one. And then, especially after that Singapore race, he just completely fell off. The US Grand Prix, he was absolutely rubbish all weekend. Mexico, I thought he did some good overtakes in the race, but in qualifying, again, terrible. Brazil, maybe in the race you could say he didn't have the best of luck with getting the time penalty he got. But yet again, as we've seen even in the final 3 races of the season, the pace drop-off compared to his teammate and compared to what he was even doing on his own before the summer break has been massive. He's not the same driver. And it's not because McLaren have, magically changed the setup or have, conspired to make sure Lando Norris wins the championship. It's got nothing to do with that. It's because Oscar Piastri, when it came down to, the time of the season where you make your money, he made very little, put it that way. Very disappointing. And I just wonder with Oscar where he goes from here, because now Lando Norris is world champion. This is Lando's team forever. And everyone knows it. So either he somehow miraculously wins a championship in a McLaren, despite it not being his team, which, we've seen situations like that before, and we know how that goes. Look at Mark Webber at Red Bull. Once Vettel won that first title, it was over. We just didn't know it at the time. Either he somehow overcomes that and wins a title at McLaren, or he moves to a different team. I think he'll have to move to a different team. When he moves to a different team is a completely different situation, and it's a topic for another day, is that discussion. But so disappointing for Piastri. And from Oscar's point of view, what is also so disappointing, it's not just the way he finished the season, but this could be the only chance he gets at winning a world championship. You don't know. Look at Felipe Massa. Won the championship for a few seconds, then lost it. Maybe thought, I'll get another chance. Never came close ever again. Look at Mark Webber. Webber had a decent chance in 2012, then his performance fell, off mysteriously. But after 2010, Webber never really came close ever again. It happens. And that's the one thing with Piastri, a driver that I really do like, that I hope isn't the case, that, he never gets the chance to right from what is, from his own point of view, the wrong of this season. But who knows what the future holds. He still is going to have, I'm sure, a great career. And I'm sure is going to, still have many great, amazing performances. But in terms of the championship and his chances moving forward, at McLaren, it's looking a bit bleak. But maybe at a different team, again, who knows what the future holds in regards to that. But 5th is where I have to put him, because compared to Norris, he just failed to deliver. When Lando, credit to him, did deliver in the second half of the season, especially after his DNF at Zandvoort. In 4th place, Charles Leclerc, a driver that has had a very tumultuous, thankfully I pronounced that right, 2025 Formula One season, driving a car so fundamentally broken, and he did the best he could. Maybe not in every single race, but he did the best pretty much he could. There were so many races where he performed to a level that was good enough to win. You know, Hungary, for example, Austin, Mexico, Monaco. Again, there was Spa was another one. There was so many races where if he had a race-winning car, he would have been right there and probably winning. But Ferrari happened once again. I just feel so sorry for the guy. His numbers have been massively skewed downwards because of the team he races for. You know, if he had raced for McLaren instead since 2019, yeah, for the first few years he wouldn't have done anything really, but since 2024 he would probably be a two-time world champion, because this guy is still, for me, one of the top 3 drivers on the grid. In qualifying, the pace is there. We've seen it so many times. And in the races, maybe not every single race, but 85% of the time, I would say, he is right there in races and is delivering easily good enough performances to win races and be a world championship contender and even winner, potentially. But the team he races for is so adamant on destroying its own chances season after season and reliving the same failure after 17 years that this is where he's at. Next season, who knows where Ferrari will be. I hope they'll be a front-running team, winning races, fighting for the championship, but does anyone really have that confidence going into next season? Even the most diehard Ferrari fans, I think, are a bit worried about next season. One thing I do hope is that next season is his last season, if the rumours are true, that he's looking to break free of his Ferrari contract for 2027, because he is not going to win a championship in a Ferrari. The dream is a wonderful dream, but it's time to live out that dream in someone else's colours, in someone else's overalls, because it's not going to happen at Ferrari. Sebastian Vettel had a dream. Fernando Alonso had a dream, and look how they ended up. And it wasn't entirely Ferrari's fault with, Vettel, but Ferrari committed multiple errors on their end, which didn't help Vettel. And then obviously with Alonso, it was messed up from the start, really. So yeah, I really hope next season is Leclerc's final year at the team, but he's so loyal to this team that who knows, maybe he will stick out with Ferrari until the end of this 2020s decade. If he does, then I wouldn't be surprised if he still doesn't have a world championship, because I just don't see this team being trustworthy enough to where you can sit there and say, yeah, I can see them winning a championship in the next 2 or 3 years. I just don't see it with this team. But Leclerc, on his own, he's doing well enough himself. The problem is not him, despite what John Elkann might think, the Ferrari chairman. The problem is not him. The problem is Ferrari. In third place, the world champion for 2025, Lando Norris, winning his first world championship, the first British driver to win the world championship since Lewis Hamilton in 2020. And overall, is he the most deserving driver to win the championship this year? In my view, no. But if you look at, him versus Piastri, which has been really the main championship battle this season, Max Verstappen has kind of been in there, but not really. when you compare Norris and Piastri, Lando Norris has been overall, over the course of the season, the better driver. And really, I think the turning point, I don't think it was that DNF necessarily at Zandvoort. I think the turning point was the error and the horrible weekend Norris had in Montreal. Because if you go look at Norris's results after that, he was a lot more consistent and picking up a lot more wins since then compared to the first half of the season. Sorry. If you look at the first half of the season, Lando, I think the first 9-10 races only had 2 race wins, but then after Montreal, ended up winning I think 3 of the next 4 races. So immediately got himself right back into the championship battle going into the summer break. Then had the DNF at Zandvoort, which looked to potentially kill his hopes of winning his maiden championship. But then, credit where credit's due, except for maybe the very odd race, most of the time he delivered the performance he needed to cut down the lead to Piastri and ultimately turn it in his favour and win the championship. So full credit to Lando Norris. He was better than Oscar Piastri in 2025 and definitely deserves to win the championship more than Oscar Piastri does. No doubt about it in my mind. And it is surprising for me to say this because a few months ago I did not think I would be saying this at all. I didn't see Lando winning the championship really at all. I didn't think his performances would turn around, and I thought as the season went on and the pressure got higher, he would probably not rise to the occasion. But credit to Lando, he did something that he failed to do in 2024, and that was rise to the occasion and deliver under pressure. Some great pole positions in there, some big race wins, and like I said, turned it in his favour and won the World Championship. And is this the first of many or the only World Championship he'll ever win? Personally, I think McLaren in 2026 and for the next few years will still be a championship contending and winning team. I don't see McLaren really dropping off. I think they're clearly built to win. I mean, they have been the best team in Formula 1 the last 2 seasons. There's no doubt about that. They're back to their absolute best. This is the strongest McLaren as a team have looked since the late 90s, maybe even the early 90s, you could argue. And this might be the very beginning of a dominance period for the McLaren team. If the Mercedes engines are as good as they are believed to be for this new era, obviously McLaren are Mercedes powered, so as long as McLaren have the best downforce package of anyone, then there's no reason why they can't win the championship yet again. Especially, not only on the constructor side, but driver's side as well. So Lando Norris, this could be the first of a few world championships. Will it be? We'll have to see. I think that with the confidence he'll have now after 2025, I could see him winning a couple more championships. Especially if McLaren have a fast enough car. But the one thing I will say with Lando is we have to remember, it wasn't a perfect season. Still made some really poor mistakes. And could have been a lot better in many races in 2025. But one thing is clear. He will have to have the fastest car on the grid if he wants to win a championship in the future. If Mercedes, Ferrari or Red Bull, or even Aston Martin have a car equal to or faster than the McLaren, I don't see Lando winning a championship. Lando, again, had a great second half of the season. He's a very good driver, but he's not, I would say, great to the point where he can win championships in cars that are not the quickest. That's my personal view. But maybe I'll be proved wrong. I was proven wrong about him in 2025. So, here's room for him doing it yet again in 2026. In second place, a driver that is also British, but for me was even better than Lando Norris, who won the World Championship, and that is George Russell. If only the Mercedes car was as competitive as the McLaren, then George Russell would be world champion, because he was outstanding in 2025. 2 race wins in Canada and Singapore. He was brilliant in both those weekends. But what made his season so special was he was consistently, pretty much every race, banging in, I wouldn't say unbelievable qualifying laps, but really special qualifying laps. Laps that really made you sit back and say, wow, this guy is special, and he really is. I might not be the biggest fan of him in terms of his personality, but in terms of a racing driver, he is very, very good and is insanely fast. And I said this on stream a couple months ago. If he gets a car that is fast enough to win a championship and he doesn't have to fight Max Verstappen to win that championship, I think he will be a world champion. And I would not be surprised if he does win next year's world championship. Because if Mercedes are right there with McLaren, or even maybe let's say Mercedes have the fastest car on the grid, I just don't see how you stop George Russell, especially when he is at his absolute quickest. The guy is insane over a qualifying lap. And what's even more impressive when you look at his race wins is he's able to deliver on it. Very similar to Sebastian Vettel, and Russell is, for me, the closest thing we've seen to Sebastian Vettel since Vettel retired. And is very similar to what Vettel was like in that dominant V8 era with Red Bull. Insanely quick in qualifying, and then very consistent and quick in the race. He just needs a fast enough car. That's all he needs, and he will be, I am sure, winning at least one world championship. If Lando Norris can win a championship in the fastest car, then Russell absolutely can, and maybe win more than one. So keep your eye on George Russell next season. He could very well be Britain's next world champion. And finally, in first place, who else was it going to be but Max Verstappen? The driver that, for me, if you're going to ask who is the most deserving of winning the World Championship in 2025, for me it is Max Verstappen. For him to be as close in the end to Lando Norris in the championship as he has been, in a car clearly slower than the McLaren, shows you how far ahead this guy is of the rest. And not only that, but if you just go and look at some of the performance this season, that not only, like I was saying with Russell, make you sit back and say, wow. There were some performances this season with Max where you literally couldn't find the words to describe how amazing some of the stuff he did in 2025 was. Suzuka taking pole and winning. How on earth did he do that? Imola didn't get pole. We all thought it was, I wouldn't say over at that point, but we thought, it would be very hard for him at that point to win, given that McLaren did take pole, and then produced one of the greatest lap 1 overtakes of all time. 2 cars he overtook around the outside at the first couple corners. Just, again, but you can't find the words to describe it. But also, the pole position at Silverstone with not just the pole position at Silverstone, he got pole with a Monza level setup, meaning that the wing level was a lot shorter than the others, and he still got pole. Again, how? How on earth did he do that? But he did, because he's Max Verstappen, because he is the greatest on earth right now. There is no doubt in my mind about it. I know people will say, oh, but this driver from this series, and oh, but this driver. I just don't think any of them compare to this guy. This guy is the best. Look what he did when he went to the Nürburgring in GT3. You know, just again, you can't describe how great this guy is. Max, at the minute, is going through, I think, pretty much what Michael Schumacher went through in the late 90s, where Michael was so great and was so insanely quick and insanely good and was so far ahead of the rest of the field that the only thing that could deny him winning every single season was by having a much slower car. And with Michael, it wasn't always having a much slower car which denied him. It was also, you know, some controversies, breaking his leg, you know, stuff like that. But with Max, that's kind of the era it feels like he's going through, where maybe he's not getting the amount of race wins and championships that he maybe feels like he deserves, but he has proven that without a doubt he is the best. The interesting question, though, is when will his next World Championship be? Not if, when. I know people may say, well, you never know, he could have an Alonso-like career. The chances of that are very, very rare, I think, or very small, rather. I think Verstappen definitely wins a 5th World Championship. But again, when will that come? Will it be in a few years' time in a Red Bull? Or will it be in a different team? Personally, I think next season will be his final season at Red Bull, because I think the Red Bull car next season is going to be even worse than it was this year. And I think I think this time next year, he will be preparing to make his debut for the Mercedes Formula One team. And I think that's possibly 2027 when he will win his next World Championship. Depends, though, of course, who his teammate will be. Will it be George Russell? Will it be Kimi Antonelli? Who knows? But this guy is going to win another World Championship. And at this point, given how he's only still, 26, amazingly, you know, how many championships will he win? It's an interesting debate, but I think there is a very high chance that this guy is going to go down as the greatest of all time. He is insane. That's why they call him Mad Max, because not just because of the way he drives and some of the, you know, the way he puts himself about on track, but he is on another planet, this guy. And I cannot wait to see what the future holds for Max Verstappen. And again, we could very well be looking at the potential greatest driver of all time. Probably won't find that out for another few years, because he still needs to probably win another couple championships, I think, to really put himself strongly in the conversation as the greatest of all time. But the talent is there. He is arguably the most talented driver we've ever seen. Maybe not the absolute outright fastest driver of all time. I think you'd have to probably say that's Ayrton Senna. But in terms of talent overall, I'm not sure there's anyone better that we've ever seen. But Max, unfortunately, couldn't win the 2025 championship, which is down to the team. If the car was fast enough, he would have won it a few races before the end of the season. I have no doubt about it, because Max is just so far ahead of the rest of the field. But guys, that is it for my driver rankings for 2025. I know it's a long video, but we went through the whole grid, and obviously I had to give my reasons for all of my rankings. Let me know in the comments what your rankings are. Again, doesn't have to be for the whole field, but try and give me at least a top 10 so I can see where you guys have certain drivers. Very interested to see what you guys think. But until my next winter break video, as now we are looking back at 2025, but also looking or starting to look ahead to 2026, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.